At this point, you're probably thinking that only wealthy nations with relatively new investments in big water infrastructure and national plans can create a sustainable water system. Think about the massive investments in materials such as concrete and steel and energy needed to treat and clean the water. Not to mention the amount of education and professional development needed to train all those engineers that operate and maintain the water systems in the United States and other nations with centralized water systems. This video is intended to challenge that assumption that only wealthy nations can be sustainable. Let's consider the following question. Can water be managed sustainably by people with different beliefs, outdated technologies, and limited water resources? To answer that question, let's go explore and see what we can discover. Welcome to the nation of Indonesia, where the island of Bali is situated within an archipelago of islands that make up this very large country. Bali is a unique island in this nation, since its inhabitants are predominantly Hindu, while the vast majority of Indonesian citizens are Muslim. It is believed that the first settlers in Bali arrived just over 2,000 years ago, and the cultivation of rice began shortly thereafter. A bit later, around 700 AD, the Hindu religion spread across Southeast Asia from India over 5,000 miles away. This brought together two important ingredients for this story, rice and the Hindu religion. Rice production, grown on terraces, originated in 1100 AD, almost 1,000 years ago. Hinduism is an ancient religion that centers on local temples run by priests. On the island nation of Bali, the ceremonies and practices were adapted to align with the planting and harvesting of Bali's main crop, rice. Shortly after arriving in Bali, the priests and the farmers started building a system of reservoirs, canals, and terraced fields covering the landscape. The growth of the irrigation system allowed the human population to grow as well. Farmers made decisions collectively about the distribution of water among the different fields in a democratic manner that reduced the amount of conflict between the farmers. The farmers worked together to plant and harvest the rice as a democratic collective. Just because your field didn't get any water didn't mean you had no work. Just the opposite. The annual rice harvest was divided and shared equally, ensuring that no one ever starved, and everyone was kept working and productive. In years with high levels of harvest, the excess was stored as insurance against famine in future years. When droughts or storms damaged the crops, the collective action among the farmers reduced the impacts. Farmers also reduced pest damage and controlled the pests with natural, non-toxic means. This system developed slowly and was maintained for over 900 years until the mid-1970s. That is when a large development bank, the World Bank, decided to try and help the island of Bali to modernize their irrigation system. The bank funded a major project to re-engineer the historic canal system, and once complete, they turned the system over to well-trained engineers from universities who implemented a hierarchical control system with a 5-year plan. A water system that had taken almost 1,000 years to be created and maintained by the farmers and priests collapsed in less than a decade, and decisions made by engineers that no one knew ignited public unrest, and conflict arose in a previously peaceful nation. The engineers that were hired to manage the system did not understand many of the lessons that had been learned by the Hindu priests and farmers in the last 1,000 years, nor did they manage the system of canals and fields as a collective. They tried to equally distribute the water to all the fields, which meant that none of the rice paddies ever got enough water, and the crop continued to fail. Dr. Lansing, a social science researcher from the University of Arizona, was hired by the World Bank to investigate the situation.
The farmers were told, in the interest of national development, take this new rice and plant just as fast as you can. If you can get 3 crops a year, great. Some of the old people said, well, the trouble with that is according to our traditional system, we schedule, we carefully time when the water goes into the fields and when it doesn't, and there are reasons for that. It's not just that the farmers were advised to use pesticides, they were forced to use pesticides. They would be punished by the government if they didn't, because the government would say, if anybody doesn't use pesticides immediately, as soon as any sign of pests appear, then the pests will spread to other fields. So within a year or two, even the farmers, pumping these pesticides into their fields couldn't kill all the pests. The government then began to fly the island, dropping pesticides from airplanes, and they succeeded in killing damn near everything. He says that everything is made by a creator, and so by disturbing anything, by killing anything, you're disturbing part of the creation, so you need to pay attention to the whole picture. Essentially he's saying you have to pay attention to the whole picture.
Wow.
The decision was eventually made to turn the management of the canals back over to the Hindu priests later around 1987. Since that time, Balinese rice farmers and Hindu priests have continued to manage a precious natural resource, water, sustainably by doing 4 things. First, they created a system of social and physical infrastructure that is understood by all stakeholders and collectively maintained. Secondly, they learned the rhythms of nature and worked hard to balance their use of water given the limited supply available on an island. And third, they created a way of sharing resources, water, labor, and rice. Fourth, they made decisions together. And by doing this, everyone agreed to follow the rules, mitigating potential conflicts before they ever started. Unfortunately, this story is not over. New challenges are arising every day. Tourists are arriving in Bali in growing numbers and demand water resources for their recreational use. The future of water sustainability in Bali will remain to be a challenge.